we've got too much nowadays. Used to, we didn't have as much, and now there's just too much stuff. People are too overwhelmed. Everything's new. Everything's revolutionary. Everything's iconic. Everything is game-changing, and it's not. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Podcast US, brought to you by Guns Magazine and sponsored by EOTech. I'm your host, Brent. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat about the interesting stuff that makes up the world of shooting. Before we get started, here's a word from our great new sponsor, EOTech.
Best known for their legendary holographic weapon sights, EOTech is built for speed, precision, and rock-solid reliability. That focus extends across their lineup, including high-performance rifle scopes for tactical use and hunting, plus durable pistol optics for professionals and enthusiasts alike. EOTech also delivers advanced night vision, thermal, and laser systems trusted by military and law enforcement worldwide. To explore the full lineup, visit eotechinc.com.
So, good morning, Roy, wherever you are.
I know. You can't see me. You can't see me.
Well, let me explain. If folks are listening to the podcast, Roy's not here. I mean, he's here, but he's not here. You had a lightning strike, so you got no internet, so we're doing it kind of the old school way. I'm recording video on me, but you're on the phone now, and it's funny. I got patch cords and stuff running every which way, so I can't move because I might unplug something, but you're coming in wall-to-wall and treetop tall. You sound pretty good, so tell us quickly about this lightning strike.
That's really funny. I felt like I went out and started the diesel generator, and plugged in the landline and, but at many levels, it was really fun being off the grid for the last day. But we had one great typical classic Missouri lightning storm yesterday, really early in the morning. And we host a cell tower for our local internet service. And so of course it's the tallest thing around with an antenna at the top of it.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, I thought, well, who designed this? You know? And even one of the guys that were out fixing it, he was looking at that and he said, maybe we ought to put like a taller lightning rod or something above it. Well, because this is about the sixth time it's happened. So we heard this flash, bang, and then suddenly all the internet went,
Well, that's crazy. I've been next to two lightning strikes, and it's amazing how the world turns white and there's a bang that rattles your giblets. And it's hit close when there's no interval between the white flash and the bang. So
that's what this was. The pole's at the north end of our property. So it was like, I don't know what that is, 400 or 500 yards away from our house. And it was like, flashbang.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, and today's topic is, you came up with this. It's completely relevant because you were pointing out that you really kind of enjoyed being off the grid. So we're going to talk today about what shooting was like before the days of the internet. And my goal here is not, we're going to say, you young guys don't get it and the internet sucks. We're not going to talk about that because I think at this point, our feelings, the good and bad about the internet, but we're just going to talk about the day before all this came to pass on the internet and all this communication we've got, and talk about the world of shooting at that point. So, we both grew up there, and it was a different world. So it occurred to me, I was talking to Roy before we got started, there was really, back in the day, there was three places where you got your shooting information from. One was gun magazines. They kind of ruled the world. The other, next one was the gun shop conversations, typically the old guy sitting at the end of the counter that mostly knew what he was talking about. And then, of course, that one guy at the range or the gun club that really did know what he was talking about. And I might add a fourth in there, catalogs. Oh, Lord, I used to love getting those catalogs in the mail. So
absolutely.
It was a different world. It was a different time. Things were definitely slower. You had to work at it to gain knowledge, and that was so much different than today. So, Roy, when we're talking nostalgia and the way it used to be, what really sticks in your mind about shooting?
Peaceful. It was more peaceful.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I have a Gun Digest, the big thick annual that Gun Digest used to put out. It's like all things shooting, right? Then they used to always have a comprehensive catalog of, what new guns and ammo and things in the back. And this one, I think, is from about 1964, 65. Well, the 22 rifle section is so well thumbed by a certain 11-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And I mean, just fingerprint smudges and pencil notes and circles and,
lines and arrows and paragraphs on the back. Yeah.
Oh, and, I mean, I took weeks and weeks and weeks of reading and rereading the specs and the price and while I was trying to make some decision, which of course was made for me anyway, but it was fun to do that. But I think it made me think in those days, at the risk of sounding FUD-like and being accused of just living in the past, which at some level I enjoyed the past, so there's nothing wrong with spending time
exactly.
there. But if you wanted to buy a gun, it wasn't a 5-minute trip on the internet. Where you quickly price shop, you quickly go into the factory website, you got all the specs and everything in there. And so to me, that kind of demeans the buying process, and anticipation is half the fun.
Yeah.
And in those days, I mean, you had to go to the magazine rack, look to see what magazines were out, look to see what was on the cover, look and see what was inside, wait to get your rifle magazine, hoping they were going to have a review of what you were thinking about, digging through all your past issues. And as you say, 15 trips to the gun store, looking at the gun you want to buy. And
let me interrupt. If it was there, because there was no guarantee, especially at a small local gun shop, they might not have that gun and may not have it for a year or 2 or 3.
Oh, it's true. Yeah, it wasn't just like you jump online to, one of the online distributors, click buy now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Oh no, that was somebody picked up the phone and called the sales guy at, Smith and Wesson.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you have any of these in stock? Well, yeah, we have one, but we can't send it. Yeah. I mean, it was honestly, the best thing about it is that it was analog. I mean, it was all analog. And if you had reference material, I mean, that's what your library was. J.B. Wood used to write for us, and J.B., if you don't know him, he used to bill himself as the oldest living gun writer. I mean, when I was editor at Handgunner, just pretty much before I retired, Jay was still writing for me, and I mostly gave him a job just because he was iconic,
Yeah.
And I read Jay when I was 14 years old. And then here he was writing for me. It was an amazing sort of complete the circle thing. But Jay was not a computer guy. He did not own a computer. And he used to type his articles on a 1940s era Royal typewriter. And people have cut and paste. Well, he used to really cut and paste and put, on the thing. But what was interesting is that I would say, if we were on a conversation, Jay would say, well, the 1927 Schwarzlose had a 3.2-inch barrel. And then he would say, or was it a 3.5? And then I would be at my computer, of course. So I would go click, 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 click. And within 5 seconds, I would say, well, Jay, it's 3.2. And he said, how did you know that? And I said, well, I just jumped online on the computer and I got the answer. And he said, really? But Jay would mail me letters all the time, and he would have blurry Xerox copies of old articles and pages from his reference collection. And he would want to share these things with me. And I always enjoyed it, because when you talk to somebody like that, the old guy at the gun store, the old guy at the shooting range, It's living history, you know. And when we lost them and are losing them, it's a loss of. We used to call it corporate knowledge in the business world. When the old guy retires, well, my gosh, you've just lost 40 years of experience in your business.
Yeah,
and that's what we see now. And I see a lot of younger people today, and there's nothing wrong with being younger people. There's nothing wrong with doing what they're doing or anything. But, if you got into shooting a year ago and you have an iPhone and a YouTube channel, that's a lot different than somebody who got into shooting 55 years ago.
Yeah.
And
well, it occurred to me, Roy, when we were talking, and then when you were talking just then, and we've talked about this before, that I don't feel like the shooting world really, I'm trying to be careful how I say this, doesn't appreciate the past as much as it used to. And I suddenly realized it's because you don't have to learn from the past. If I think some cool gun in Call of Duty is something I'd like to own, like you said, I see 15 reviews. I can find 7 places that own or where I can have one shipped to my local gun store. There's probably 6 or 8 YouTube videos from guys that may or may not know what they're talking about. And again, before you had to go searching for it, and you would always talk to the guy at the gun store. You'd talk to the old guy at the range, and even if they said, "Well, that's a piece of garbage," even though they never held it, you at least had to seek out that institutional knowledge you were talking about and get some background and some basis for what you were doing. And now that's gone away. So I would say shooters today are much better informed overall, but I think along the way we kind of lost that idea that we need to hear how it used to be, what the old guys think. And I'm not boo-hooing it. I'm just saying that's how it's different today. That, when you see the old crusty guy out at the range and he had all his gear and he was taking it slow and, pouring a cup of coffee, you would generally try to work your way down there to hear what he had to say about what you were doing, what he was doing. And I don't think there's that same focus anymore. And that's one thing that I hate to see that we've lost.
I agree with you. I mean, you look at AI, you had a name for it. I think Jim Shepard said what the information you see now.
Yeah.
What is it? Potato chips?
Potato chips.
And while we have this unbelievable volume of information, you only have to look at the shooting wire every day to see hundreds of press releases about every tiny thing in the world.
Yeah.
Which is not anything we would have seen 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, a press release to you and I 25, 30 years ago was literally a press release that got mailed to us.
Mm-hmm.
But more than likely a print photo, and I mean, at many levels, I think that it forces you to slow down a little bit, forces you to dig harder to get the information. I think we kept the information better and longer. And we keep saying like the old guy at the end of the counter. I think what we forget, though, is that we were 18 years old, and that old guy at the end of the counter might have been 40. You know what I mean?
Younger than both of us. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Fine, Roy. Point that out.
But I mean, if it was his gun store or something, he built this gun store analog.
Yeah.
In other words, do you remember going into the auto parts stores and they always had this long catalog machine sitting on the counter?
Yep.
And you would say, "Hey, I need a set of spark plugs for a 1966 Ford 289. And then the young guy behind the counter would run over there and go flip, 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 flip. And then you'd see him start to narrow it down. And then he'd flip, flip. And his finger would go to a page and scroll down. And he'd say 2-barrel or 4-barrel carburetor, And then he would write down what the number was and then go in the back room, and hand you whatever it was you needed. And I don't know that he was appreciably slower than going in the same store today where they look it up on the computer.
Well, especially when the computer's down.
And I will tell you this, that I vividly remember you go in a store like that and the old gun stores, And you would walk up to a counter and there would be an older guy there, right? Maybe the store owner, maybe Fred, who's been the manager there for 30 years. And you would say, I need a set of points for a 1959 Rambler 6-cylinder. And he would look at the young guy and he would say, it's an XR16-7. Yes. It's in the back.
Yeah.
Third shelf down on the right in the blue box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And same thing for the gun stores. You'd go in, you'd say, hey, I was thinking of, that there's that Smith & Wesson, it's a this, and it had these features. And then someone would invariably say, oh, you mean it's a Model 17. I remember they first came out in about 71.
Yeah.
They had a 6-inch barrel. You could get Magna stocks or Goncalo, and it's like nowadays, it's hard to find people who can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, they jump on their computer and they go, oh, let me see,
Yeah.
So,
well, and the one point that I brought up and you kind of touched on there is catalogs. I was so enamored with catalogs, and I've said before, I was so into everything. I've got a short attention span, so I was into scuba diving and hunting and fishing and so I had catalogs for all that stuff, and I would just sit for hours and hours and do the same thing. I was the same way with outdoor and gun magazines, but I kept them all, and I got rid of all my Outdoor Life and Sports Afield, which I kicked myself. But it was the catalogs that I tended to gravitate to, and I would wear those things out, and it was literally my nighttime bedside reading that I would just sit there and I think it goes back to we're old enough. Do you remember the Sears Wish book?
Oh, yeah.
That's not even a thing anymore, but Sears sold everything in the world. It put Walmart to shame. And, they had this, especially around Christmas when you were a kid, had this giant catalog, which every toy, ever invented. And then as I got older, the Ted Williams line of guns, and they sold all that stuff through mail order. And, eventually you had to go to the local store to pick it up. But they had stuff you'd never seen of, you'd never heard of. And these kind of airbrushed guys striding through the field with a couple of pheasants. And it was just such a magical thing. And I just dreamed and wished, against all hope, that someday I would have that and I could do that. And I'd own 4 of those. And here we are today, where a few keystrokes and I can find everything I ever wanted to know about it. It's just not the same for me.
It's not satisfying the way it was. It is absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah.
And in other words, when we didn't have access to the internet and this potato chip bag full of, unnecessary flooded information, when you got that catalog from Ruger, I mean, that was the only way you got that information, and to gaze at that picture of the Ruger 1022 or the whatever it is you're looking at, that was the only time you could see it, so you couldn't just always go back to your computer and open up 500 websites with pictures of it and people shooting it on YouTube and this was it. And so it was in your own mind as when you did just what you're talking about. You had these adventures in your mind. You're imagining yourself walking with it. You can smell the empty shotgun shell, and I think that because it was a limited palette for us, that it meant more. And I think that is a very good thing. And a lot of people today, younger people, don't have that. In other words, it's instant gratification.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one of the funnest things in the world to me was, you mentioned the Sears catalog. There's Montgomery Ward's, of course.
Right.
And the other ones. But when I used to get the Brownells catalog, and I've got, 40 years ago, right? I got my first Brownells catalog. That information wasn't anywhere else. No. You couldn't buy that stuff anywhere else.
Nope.
You couldn't go to a store and get, the gunsmithing tools. And so I would go through the catalog and trying to stay within my budget, and you fold down the pages and you mark them. And that was before Post-it notes, so you'd use a piece of paper that you put in each page. And then finally I would decide what I wanted. And then, of course, now this is going to seem like strange, like from another planet to some young people who are listening, but you would tear out the order blank that was in the catalog, right? And an envelope usually that was part of it. And then you would fill it out and write your address and write what you want, and then write a check, right?
Yeah.
Put it in there, put a 5-cent stamp on it or whatever it was, and mail it. And then it would take a week or 10 days to get there. Then they would take a week or 10 days to process it. And then it would take a week or 10 days. And so, a month to 6 weeks later, you'd get a little box in the mail from Brownells with the stuff you got.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it was exciting to get the catalog. It was exciting to look through it. It was fun to drop that mail in the post office box because you knew that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you waited, and then that box appears magically, and you open it up, and it's like Christmas time. And I'm sorry, it's not the same when you click on Amazon, and that afternoon you get whatever it was you just bought.
Yeah.
We
just did that. I've got some new windows here in the grand studio, and it's wonderful, but I had to add some new sensors for our alarm system. And again, back in the old days, it would be even hard to find those, and you couldn't do it yourself. But I went to Amazon, I clicked on what I wanted, and they brought it that afternoon. And it's like, man, that is, I always remember the few times as a kid, especially, I remember I sent away for my parents let me buy a ant farm, and it seemed like it took months and months, and then it got there and I didn't realize the ants didn't come with it. So I had to send away the certificate and wait. And I love that we have the instant gratification. I can get virtually anything I want. Nowadays, if something says it'll take 7 to 10 days, it's like, no, it won't. I'll go somewhere else. But, it really taught you patience about everything in life, because there was no instant gratification, virtually none. And everything you did, you had to take it slow, as you always say, analog, and search around and look for things. And you just because you wanted something didn't mean you got it. And another analogy I'll use is I remember when I got Spotify, which is, online music platform, and I'm a big music guy, and I realized, oh my goodness, I have virtually every song ever recorded at my fingertips, and I can take it everywhere. And, back in the day when I had my portable record player, and then eventually my component stereo system with the giant speakers, I don't know what I would have done if somebody had said, here's a magic box that you can have every song ever recorded and run it through your stereo. And it's like, I just often wonder, I sit back and think, I don't think we understand how that's changed the human psyche, even now, about the ability to get what you want when you want it, and anything you want. I'm sure there's a lot of downsides, and it has changed everything. So I agree, Roy. People, I don't think, appreciate the what we have today. And I'm not poo-pooing it, but it's so different, and it is wonderful. When you want something, you get it right now, but it sure didn't used to be that way about anything in the old days.
No, and it taught us patience, and it taught us to appreciate what we had. Yeah. And it taught us how to work with a limited palette.
Yeah.
I remember going to the store, and if you wanted watercolors, you bought like this little tray and it had 6 watercolors in it, and because I like to paint. And now I was in Hobby Lobby or something the other day, and there's hundreds of choices and hundreds of, it's just, it means it, I guess. It's hard to describe, but I think people today, we're spoiled, but we're also overwhelmed. Okay,
that's a big one. Yeah.
I listen to Amazon Music, right? I work at my workbench. I listen to Amazon Music, but I have noticed that generally all I listen to is they have a link called Your Most Played.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, kind of new agey, restful background, a little bit of classical kind of stuff. I mean, I have access to millions of songs and I don't listen to any of them virtually,
Me too.
And yeah. And we still have a really huge CD collection, and more often than not, I just go to the CD cabinet we have and I go, you find yourself looking and you go, oh, I remember that. I forgot we had this one, right?
Yep.
And you put it on and immediately it takes you right back somewhere. But and you don't get that, I think, by just tuning into, Spotify or something. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I mean, you and I are technical. I mean, we have computers and digital things, and we're doing this podcast, and I have, a module on my car I can plug in and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like we're, Neanderthals regarding all this kind of stuff. If some young kid is talking to me about the new Apple laptop that they just introduced, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I evaluate it and think, would that be good for me to have? So it's not that we're not in touch with modern technology, but last night, Susie and I usually kind of wind down early in the evening, 6, 7 o'clock or something like that. We have a little dinner, sit down, watch a BritBox British show or something, right? Yeah. Well, last night we didn't. So I stayed in the garage and I listened to a CD. And I worked on some guns, projects I wanted to do for myself. And it was very peaceful and it was very restful.
Yeah. On that point, that's what kills me now is you hear people talk about, I did a digital detox, and I read a story not too long ago about, detoxing on the airplane, and it was written by a young person and made it sound like it was climbing Mount Everest to be disconnected for 2.5 hours. And I thought,
they call it going animal.
Exactly, or going feral. Yeah, I've heard a bunch of different terms.
Going feral. Yeah,
it's like you all need to do that, and it's funny, as I look at maybe retirement someday. I've said I'm going to get rid of my computer and my laptop and my phone and just be that guy, and all my friends, oh, there's no way. I said, no, I think I could do it. I know you could do it, Roy. So, but like you said, we are definitely, I'm kind of proud. I had an extensive CD collection, vinyl collection, movie collection, and I digitized it, and I have a server so I can listen or watch that any place that I've got connectivity to my house. And it's been nice, but I find myself usually going back to, like you said, on Spotify. I listen to 70s, 60s, and I'm big into country music, and that came as I was older. And I was with my brother yesterday, and he was listening. He tuned the station to modern country. I'm like, no, that's awful stuff. And I put on one of my playlists of rednecks, White Sox, and Blue Ribbon beer. And he's like, yeah, that's music. And yeah, okay, I'm going total FUD on you. But anyway, we're not troglodytes when it comes to technology. No. It's just we've seen it both ways, and there's advantages to both. I get it. But one thing I wanted to tune it back into the gun world, kind of talk about, you touched on something. I think this is part of the problem. We've got too much nowadays. Used to, we didn't have as much, and now there is, for a lot of different reasons, there's just too much stuff. People are too overwhelmed. I find myself paralyzed, paralysis by analysis. You don't just have one, say, moon clip for your revolver. You've got 50 different manufacturers, and each claims to be the best ever. And it's that way with every single product category. And you and I have talked about it. It gets pretty jaded at this point that everything's new, everything's revolutionary, everything's iconic, everything is game changing, and it's not. And you just think, in my mind, there's always that, am I really buying the right stuff here? Because you just don't know. But talk about that plethora that we have, the plethora of choices we have today in the shooting world. It's just more than I ever imagined 40 years ago.
Well, it used to be, if you were to go shoot your .22 rifle, you went to FedMart or Kmart or the local gun store, and you bought a box or two of 99-cent .22 ammo, and there was only a half a dozen different makers.
I was going to say, if that. Yeah.
Yeah. and you went out and you enjoyed your day shooting and you shot maybe 100 rounds. Or I should say not nobody, but few people would go out and burn through a brick of 22s.
Yeah.
I mean, it just didn't happen. It was really funny. And no, I was reading the other day that the average person in today's digital world is subjected to 2,000 to 5,000 advertisements a day.
I believe it.
So, yeah. And because people say, well, no, I don't think so. Well, just turn on your computer, go to any website you're going to, any forum, any news, and it's constant advertising feeds everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So we really are overwhelmed. And I mean, if you do a Google search, or I like DuckDuckGo, a little advertisement for DuckDuckGo, but, and you do 22 ammo options. Well, you better sit down.
Yeah.
And I think it can be overwhelming. I think simplify is important. When I started woodworking, 25 years ago, seriously, I would get the woodworking catalogs and whatnot, and you would say, oh, I need one of those, I need one of those, I need one of those, I need one of those. And I bought a lot of those. And then as time goes by, I realize actually,
really
I only need about 20% of what I bought.
Yep.
And it's almost like that most listened to music. In my shop, I have the tools that I use to build everything.
Yeah.
And you're always going to them, and the fancy things I bought because I thought I needed, I actually really don't need. And so I see that in the industry today. I mean, when we were young and we went to the gun store, and we had been saving and we were going to buy a gun, some new gun about something, and then we could afford a box of ammunition for it. Well, gosh, it was exciting. And it was, it took time, it took energy, it took research, it took talking to people who knew, it took driving to the gun store, it took, all of that, which to me makes that experience more worthwhile and memorable. Because I ordered something from Amazon this morning, and I'll be honest with you, I absolutely don't even remember what I ordered.
Yeah. It's not like when everybody gathered around when the postman brought you this package. Oh, what have you got? What have you got? There's 17 boxes at the front door now.
But that's it. Well, and I'm going to challenge listeners, and this is the challenge, because I do this all the time. If I'm going to go spend a day on the tractor, I turn my phone off.
Yeah.
It's off. The only reason I have it with me is in case the tractor tries to kill me.
Yeah.
But turn it off. No text messages, no listening to music in the background, no anything.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, it is really restful. I would equate it to this. Put a 50-pound backpack on and carry it around all day, and then take it off. And it's like, and do that. And so just detach yourself. I mean, it's hard anymore because you said catalogs. It's almost impossible to get catalogs anymore.
Yeah.
When I first started writing, when I was with our FMG, so this would have been the really early 90s when I was kind of doing it, pretty much a masthead writer in 91, 92. When we went to the SHOT Show, the last day of SHOT Show, everyone would be assigned a section of the SHOT Show.
Yeah.
And you would walk in and pick up catalogs from all the booths.
Yep.
Of any note. Yeah. So then we would box them up and we would ship back usually like 10 or 12 file, office file boxes.
Yep.
Full of catalogs.
I did that as a freelancer. I remember one year I shipped home 20 pounds of literature. And it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, that was the only thing, and every once in a while, like in the late 90s, someone would have a CD. It's like, whoa,
ooh, this is space age.
Yeah. If you needed a picture we're doing a roundup of hunting knives.
Yeah.
Well, you would go to the catalogs in the office and look up in the knife section. and then you would see what catalogs you have, what were new knives for the last SHOT Show.
Yep.
And then hopefully in the catalog, because they were press kits, there were prints of whatever the knives are. If not, you would call them and they would mail you a print, right? And I'm not saying that was better, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I remember when they used to use my daughter Madison when she was little, like 10 or 12 years old. She would come in and she would spend like 3 days pulling out the old catalogs and filing the new ones in, in the office.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it's really interesting, though, is that you get to really know stuff. I mean, when you go and you look through all these catalogs, I mean, you really have a sense of the depths of what's going on in the industry and people. But nowadays, I mean, if you wanted to experience the joy of getting the new Remington catalog in the mail and sitting down, like that joy we used to have when the latest Guns and Ammo or Guns magazine would appear.
Yep.
And it's like, you knew you were going to sit down and relax and have your cup of coffee or whatever. And it was going to be very fun for the next hour or two.
Well, and you learned something that you didn't know you were going to learn. That's we've identified that as part of the problem today is everything is so, thanks to algorithms, everything is so narrowly niched that if you're into long distance coyote hunting in the Midwest, that's all you're going to see and hear about. And back then, you might not have any interest in going to Africa, but suddenly you'd read a story about going to Africa. And that I think sparked those many directions of, I never thought about doing that, but maybe I ought to try sometime. So,
we used to hear about it all the time from readers because they would say, especially the subscribers to Guns Magazine, because you would cover shotguns and rifles and handguns and hunting and, and everything, right? Gunsmithing, ammo, everything. And people would tell me all the time is they would say, well, I'm mostly a rifle shooter, but I always enjoy reading the other articles because it exposes me to things I wouldn't normally be exposed to.
Yeah.
And I don't think the people don't get that. I know if you jump onto your computer, Google, and you type in random articles about shooting and hunting and I mean, who knows what you're going to come up with, but it's not going to be vetted and formatted, and it's just going to be this random,
and probably now AI slop.
And it'll be AI slop.
The magazine on your revolver needs to be kept clean. What?
Yeah. Let's talk about why you need a magazine and revolver. The history. The history of why you have a magazine on a revolver.
Yeah.
And no, I'm with
crazy.
You. It's just not the same.
It's not the same.
It's a quality of life. And I think, yes, we take advantage of the convenience of it. And yes, I like having the navigation app in my phone, but I used to have a map book. And I'm sorry, but if we had to have a map, I'd say like, okay.
Still got my file drawer full of them.
I know at some level I would actually kind of like it, and so.
Well, a couple of points I want to make as we wrap this special semi-video, semi-audio edition up is
analog.
Yes. Now, something that you said that really struck me, and this is just an observation, maybe we can discuss it further in another episode, but, we didn't used to dump ammunition. We didn't burn ammunition. Like you said, even if you bought 50 rounds of 22, you usually took some home with you. And the day, if you felt extravagant, you might do a mag dump. But I always felt afterwards like, well, I kind of wasted that. And these days of buying, a case of 9mm and burning it in one range session, that never, ever, ever, ever happened. And again, I think it's just that whole mindset of resources were limited, and it was something that you did feel like you needed to conserve. So I thought that was an interesting observation that you brought up when we were talking about it. And the other thing, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, if you think about it, I mean, yes, I have cases of ammunition. Some of that is left over because I needed it because of what our career was, right? Writing and doing and testing millions of guns and all that kind of stuff. But I vividly remember the days that weren't horribly long ago where I would look at my ammo shelf and I would say, well, there's 5 boxes of 308 and there's 2 bricks at 22, and I've got 6 boxes of 9mm, and I was perfect.
You're set.
I thought, whoa, yeah, that's a lot. You know, I mean, because shooting a box of 50 9mm at one time was, it's like maybe sometimes, you know, and now I had somebody just sent me a reader sent me a picture. Hey, I wanted to show you how good I shot at the range. And it was a silhouette target at the range from 10 yards. And he told me he had shot 200 rounds at it.
Wow.
You know, and so it was just like, you know, it looked like a pattern.
Yeah.
Right. And I never saw that at the range, you know, before.
Yeah.
You know,
well, I remember back in the cop qual days, a course of fire was generally 50, and you might do that 2 or 3 times. And it's like, man, I burned 150 rounds today. And I think that's a normal day on the range for a lot of folks.
Way more than that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm with you, because I remember, well, even today I go out on my back patio here and I'll shoot a couple of cylinderfuls from a revolver, or maybe half a dozen single shot rifles, and I savor it. And it's like a good wine, right? You don't gulp a good wine down, or at least you shouldn't, right? Unless someone else is buying it. But but you should sip it, you know? And I think in today's shooting industry and aficionados, everyone is gulping.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not everyone. Yeah, not everyone. I'm generalizing. I understand that. There are people with good taste, or people who, you know, do whatever it is they do. And if you want to gulp, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But there are other options that just might be more enjoyable for you.
Well, I was going to say quality over quantity has kind of gone by the wayside. So that's something that folks may want to consider next time you go out. And like Roy said, if you want to burn a case of ammo, knock yourself out. That's the sound of freedom going down range. But there's also joy in bringing back that half box of 50 rounds if you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish on your day on the range. And the final thing I'm going to say, you beat me to the point. We didn't even talk about this, but you beat me to the point, is regardless of your age, take a digital detox today. Go 24 hours. The world will not end. You will not end up in a hole. Life will go on, and it'll help you appreciate that life does go on, even if you're not connected 24/7. So again, we're not harshing on modern technology and the internet, but boy, the world was certainly different. And I do agree with you, Roy. I think it was just more peaceful. So,
you know, let me, I'd like to end with one quick thing. Not too long ago, I got a reader email. And it was pretty long. I thought, well, what's this all about, right? And he was talking about something that it really struck a chord with me. He said, you know, I've been reading American Handgun and Guns magazine for about 10 years. He's a younger guy in his 30s, late 30s. And he said, when I first started shooting, I went and I bought Glocks and M&Ps and ARs and, you know, and all the normal commodity guns. And he said, and after years of reading articles, and he said, especially your articles, he says, it dawned on me finally that most of you guys favor uniqueness or something of higher quality or craftsmanship or custom features, or you don't really settle for the common denominator that everyone has.
Yeah.
And he's right, you know. And it comes with experience, but because I bought my share of commodity guns when I was a kid.
Definitely.
You couldn't afford anything else, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's an important point, and that is that in your headlong race through your shooting hobby, is, you know, just stop, like you say, unplug a little bit, stop gulping, and learn to savor the good tastes that are out there. And I think you'll have a lot more fun. So
Totally agreed. So let us know what you think. If you're an older shooter, a more experienced shooter, let's hear your nostalgic reminiscences. And if you're a younger shooter, let us know how you feel about the world today. And if you really like all this, everything all the time, 24/7, or if you yearn for the days where maybe things were a little bit simpler, I'd like to hear some of those insights. And before we go, of course, we've got a great new sponsor, EOTech. That's the holographic sight that is on the shotgun under my side of the bed in case things go sideways. But here's a word from our new friends, EOTech.
To explore the full lineup, visit EOTechInc.com.
Well, Roy, I forgot to mention, if you want to reach out to us, if you're watching on YouTube or watching Roy's pretty static face, you can leave us a comment, or you can reach out to both of us at editor@gunspodcast.us. And Roy, I'm going to try and dig through my archives and find some really bizarro pictures of you, and probably go back through some old videos. It's funny when you get those auto-generated things. Sometimes it's, and I'll try to use a lot of those photos for when I pop your face up on the screen.
Well, you know what? Wait, do me a favor. Because I probably have some laying around. Dig up some photos of catalogs.
Oh, yeah.
Old gun catalogs and stuff. Maybe some pictures of old gun stores and pictures of 22 boxes and stuff like that.
Yep.
Let me know. I'll help you with those. Because I think as we talk about that stuff, I think people may enjoy seeing it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have one reader who's in his late 80s, and about twice a year he sends me a priority mail medium-sized box packed with catalogs.
Yeah.
That he's collected over the years. And this is stuff like from the late 50s.
Wow.
And 60s, and I always just take this swoony scroll down memory lane.
Yeah,
it's so much fun.
Well, you make a really good point. The 70th anniversary issue of Guns Magazine, of which I was the editor, last January's issue, we did a retrospect, and I scanned a whole bunch of those. Military rifle, $9.95, shipped directly to your home, and
you wish run those.
Yeah, I'll run some of those. Well, great idea. So a couple other quick housekeeping notes. Of course, Roy just bought a sweatshirt that says gunspodcast.us. We've got some coffee mugs. I'm pleased to say the site is working well, and the products are great quality. We use a third party. That's not something that Roy is not building or sewing our sweatshirts or t-shirts, but I am pleased to say that the quality is good. I'm happy with it. We wish they were a little less expensive, but when you're talking small quantities, it's just the way it is. But if you would like to impress your friends down at the gun store with your Guns Podcast US coffee mug, or wear your hoodie or t-shirt, it's all there. Go to gunspodcast.us. Of course, please go to gunsmagazine.com. They are our title sponsor, and all the great gun goodness and your favorite gun writers are there. You can also watch and listen to the podcast there. So that's our preferred method of you finding it. But of course, we're all on all the major podcast directories. So anyway, Roy, any parting thoughts about the great nostalgia of shooting?
Well, I ordered a sweatshirt online, just like everybody would do. And it was easy, and it arrived pretty timely. And what amazed me was that my wife, Susie, who is, shall I say, hard to please, she likes it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't like anything. So she's actually wearing it, and it's pretty fun.
It did my heart good to hear you say that. So
yep, it's the truth.
So check it out, gunspodcast.us. And there's a bunch of other stuff there. You may enjoy reading some of my drivel and diatribe there at Guns Podcast US. So anyway, of course, on behalf of Roy Huntington and my audio-only co-host this week, hopefully he'll be back on the internet and you'll see his live-action shining face. But anyway, I'm your host, Brent Wheat, here on the Guns Podcast US, brought to you by Guns Magazine. And as we always say, now it's time to get out there and get shooting.